It's Wednesday, October 5th, 2022, 6 p.m. This regular Board of Commissioners workshop meeting is called to order. City Clerk, will you call the roll?
Mayor Hendricks,
Here.
Vice Mayor Andrews.
Here.
Commissioner Taglerini,
Here.
Commissioner Kerr,
Here.
Commissioner Hudson,
Here.
all are present.
First is public comment. If there's anyone that has any public comment on anything that is not on tonight's agenda, please step up to the podium, state your name and address, limit your comments to 3 minutes, and do not include anything that's on the agenda. Okay, next on the agenda is proclamation Fire Prevention Week 2022, October 9th through the 15th, 2022.
Whereas the city of Madeira Beach, Florida is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting our community. And whereas fire is a serious public safety concern, both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk from fire. And whereas home fires caused 2,580 civilian deaths in the United States in 2020, according to the National Fire Protection Association. And fire departments in the United States responded to 356, 500,000 home fires. And whereas smoke alarms sense smoke well before you can, alerting you to danger in the event of fire, in which you may have as little as 2 minutes to escape safely. And whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in reported home fires in half. And whereas City of Madeira Beach residents should be sure everyone in the home understands the sounds of the smoke alarms and knows how to respond. And whereas City of Madeira Beach residents who have planned and practiced a home fire escape plan are more prepared and will therefore be more likely to survive a fire. And whereas City of Madeira Beach residents will make sure their smoke and carbon monoxide alarms meet the needs of all their family members, including those with sensory and physical disabilities. And whereas City of Madeira Beach first responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education. And whereas City of Madeira Beach residents that are responsive to public education measures are better able to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes. And whereas the 2022 Fire Prevention Week theme, Fire Won't Wait, Fire, Plan Your Escape, effectively serves to remind City of Madeira Beach it is important to have a home fire escape plan. Therefore, I, John B. Hendricks, Mayor of City of Madeira Beach, do hereby proclaim October 9th through the 15th, 2022 as Fire Prevention Week throughout this community, and urge all the people of the City of Madeira Beach to plan and practice a home fire escape plan for Fire Prevention Week 2022, and to support the many public safety activities and efforts of City of Madeira Beach Fire and Emergency Services. In witness whereof, I have set my hand and caused the official seal of the City of Madeira Beach, County of Pinellas, and the State of Florida to be affixed this 5th day of October 2022. John B. Hendricks, Mayor.
Thank you. I also want to say thanks to the fire department, even more so than just fire prevention. Right now, we have 2 firefighters down in Fort Myers helping with that rescue right now. And all the folks over there just go above and beyond on a daily basis. So Chief Belk, I want to thank you for what you and all the firefighters do. Thank you so much. Okay, next is RSP 2022-02, Citywide Recycling and Process Services discussion. Director Wepfer. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners.
So what you have before you is the bids that were received. When we placed the bid out on August 12th. We did the bid opening publicly on the 9th of September. Once we received those bids, we did the bid tabulation, which you all have in your packet. If you'd like me to go through that, I can. I can also explain maybe.
Please go through it.
Please go through it. Okay. Sorry, let me pull it up really quick.
Give me a page if you will, Megan. when you-
I do not have that in front of me. Robin, do you have a? page?
172.
Okay,
So we received 3 bids, 1 no bid. So Waste Connections is our current contractor whose contract is set to expire on December 31st. Their residential rate was bid at $13.95. And then with the commercials / the condos, the reasons for the bid out of the cart numbers is because currently we charge any condo that could have 2 carts the same rate as somebody that has 35 carts. So we figured it would be easier to break it up by carts and increments of 5. That way that we could charge a little bit more and maybe make it cheaper on the residents. So for Waste Connections, 1 to 5 carts is $30.90. 6 to 10 is $36.05. 11 to 15 is $41.20. 16 to 20 is $46.35. 21 to 25 is $51.50. 26 to 30 is $56.65. 31 to 35 is $61.80. And then 36 to 40 is $67.36. Waste Pro, the residential rate was $11.53 per month. And let me also note that these commercial carts are per pickup. That's the price for them. They could go anywhere from one time a week pickup to every day a week pickup. Does that make sense? Residents are per month.
okay.
So Waste Pro for the 1 to 5 carts is $16.08. 6 to 10 is $32.16. 11 to 15 is $48.09. 16 to 20 is $64.32. 21 to 25 is $80.40. 26 to 30 is $96.48. 31 to 35 is $112.56. And 36 to 40 is $128.64. Now, the next one is Coastal. The numbers that's on the bid tabulation sheet is the numbers that were turned in at the bid opening on September 9th. I'll read those aloud, but then I also want to note that they turned in a revised bid on the 14th once I contacted all to make sure that they bid this correctly. So their residential rate per month was $7.50. 1 to 5 carts is $23.33. And then their 6 to 10 all the way through their 21 to 25 is $15. And then 26 to 40 was $10. You all have the revised numbers in your packet as well, and I'm not sure what that page is, but I'll read those aloud. The residential rate that they turned in for the revised was $12.65. The 1 to 5 was $93.32. 6 to 10 was $60. 11 to 15, $60. 16 to 20, $60. 21 to 25, $60. 26 to 30, $40. 31 to 35, $40. And 36 to 40, $40. With that being said, due to turning in a revised quote after the fact, they should be deemed non-responsive. Also, we did a checklist, which you also have included in on your packet for all of the bids to ensure that they included all the documents requested. Coastal did not turn in their certificate of insurance. Waste Connections and Waste Pro had every document requested.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any questions for me?
Well, I have them.
Sorry.
I have them more for coastal. How can you be that far off on a bid and come back and revise it by not quite double, but
Right. So we also did reference checks. We created a sheet and contacted all of the references, and coastal is new to this area. They are mostly South Florida. So I'm not sure if they just didn't understand the bid, but they also didn't ask any questions for clarification.
and is there anyone here from coastal?
I don't believe so.
Don't think so. Okay, thank you.
So from the commercial places,
Mhm.
your beach, are they like 20 units usually for the average or 60 or?
Well, mostly where we have the carts are at the condos along Gulf Boulevard, or anything that are over 6 units, I believe, get the carts. So we also have Bamboo has carts, and they have a lot, I think over 30. 25 carts there. So it's a business, which some of the businesses have the dumpsters, which are not included in on this bid for the cardboard. But a lot of your Gulf Boulevard condos, the vacation rentals have the carts.
Okay. Because when Mr. Twitty was here a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, he came up with, we have 3,400 residents or residential properties. And we have like 475 commercial. And, you start to look at some of these prices. I guess we kind of lean towards the residential as the driver, but I don't want to do something bad for the commercial.
Right. So the difference is residents cannot opt out of recycling. The condos are able to opt out of the recycling. So when we first started this program, we had a lot more that were participating, but since then, I think we're at maybe 30, probably around 30 condos that are participating in the program right now. Waste Connections is in the audience, sorry. So
I have a couple of questions if I could go.
Sure.
Sorry, I know this is awkward being up here like this. So I have a question about waste connections on page 153. It says note any requested alternatives to the proposed cost. It says the cost for an additional cart is $75 per cart. I understand that, but then there's a period and it says plus $5 a month for service per cart. Can I assume that $5 a month is not an extra fee per household? That's if you get an extra cart. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Okay, so if that's correct, it looks like Waste Connections charges less, a couple bucks more for private residents, but less for business rates. As Mr. Hudson was saying, that seems like more friendly to our businesses. Waste Pro is $11.53 a month, no additional fee for container. Waste Pro is exceeding more expensive for businesses, but only after they exceed 15 containers. So I think that's something to be considered also.
And the other option is whether or not we even continue to recycle.
Megan, I have one quick question. Apples to apples, currently, what is our residential rate? I don't know off the top of my head.
Currently is $7 per month for residential, and for commercial, $25.73 per pickup. So we have to remember that residents are per month, the commercial carts are per pickup.
Okay, so
And the residential collection is weekly. by the way,
Correct, on
right?
Wednesdays.
Weekly. But the rate is a monthly rate, as Swepper stated.
And we will also be increasing the size of the container, so we will go to 64 gallons for residents with a lid, and then the commercial will still stay at that 96 gallons.
So does that, for me, the big container could last me weeks without filling it up to put it on the street. I don't know how that would work for other people. What I'm getting at is, should we look at a bi-weekly pickup with those bigger containers?
We have a lot of residents that fill up multiples of those bigger containers weekly. We have some that say that they don't even need regular garbage pickup because they fill up those containers. We have a very heavy recycling community. So I'm not sure a bi-weekly would work with just those 64-gallon containers. Not for all, for some
Yeah.
possibly.
Megan, I didn't poll my residents about how often they wanted recycling. I did send them these alternatives, and of the 52 emails I sent out, 2 responded they didn't want recycling at all. The rest responded that they did want to continue, and they liked the larger container. Personally, I can only speak for myself. I fill up a recycling easily once a week. I wish I had another one. So that's just me personally.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
First, I wanted to check with the city attorney, make sure that throwing out the one bid is
The coastal.
okay.
It is okay.
Okay.
It's deemed responsive,
Yeah, I mean,
unresponsive rather.
Yeah, deemed non-responsive for,
yeah, we're not throwing it out. I mean,
well, for
it's
multiple
there.
reasons that you can't consider it.
We should not
Yeah,
consider it.
you should not.
Should not.
but
It's
That's our,
just included because it was turned in,
right.
but should not consider that, no.
Okay. On the budget we just passed, there's a line item there for recycling service fee. Is that the city's cost for the city locations that do recycling?
So we don't have a city location that does recycle. Are you talking about in the sanitation budget, correct?
The sanitation budget as a line
what
item,
recycling is.
recycling service fee.
That is what we
That's-
pay, go ahead.
That's what we pay.
Now, we pay that,
To
but we are
supplement what
we are
the,
reimbursed. So the cost, we have to pay the contractor, but then we get those fees back from Pinellas County does the billing for us for the residents. But the commercial side of it is done through the city of Madeira Beach.
so that would reflect commercial only.
No, that's everything.
That should be everything,
So customers pay Pinellas County
right?
for the sanitation and recycling. It's all one fee. The county then sends us all of that money.
Mhm.
We record it in our sanitation fund and identify trash,
Okay, so that's
garbage.
considered a revenue there. Okay.
Well, I'm not sure what page you're, but I mean, there's a
Well,
revenue where we receive it and then
And
there's an
there's an
expense that we pay our current.
I think what you might be
Contractor.
looking at might be the expense.
No,
possibly.
actually. I'm
It's a
looking-
break even.
Okay. I was just trying to understand that line item. I know it was in the budget and that was in the past meeting, but just trying to understand it because that maybe even at a $7 a month rate, that doesn't, it just 120 or 1,222 residences plus the commercial. That doesn't seem to work somehow. But I digress. That's not what we're really considering here. So the RFP, the way I read it, it's going to be considered on cost will be the overall determining factor in this valuation, large caps. So is that an aggregate between the residential plus what we think the commercial is going to use? Is there an overall calculation that's combining the two so that if we choose any, it's going to be an aggregate, or is it going to be based on that, strictly on that residential rate? Am I getting over your head?
We don't know yet because we
Right.
really don't know the commercial. We know what we've the commercial usage, that's not a guarantee that it will continue.
Mhm.
So we really don't know precisely. We'll know after the first month, the second month for sure,
But you
but
have
we
to-
really don't know. But you do need to take that into account in recommending which firm to go with of the two.
Right.
That's
and
why
we're-
it's up on the
and-
screen.
Right, and we're here discussing it, so I'm just trying to figure out, okay, if one is substantially lower on the commercial rate and a couple bucks cheaper on the residential rate, but you have so many,
Mhm. So I can tell you
How's
the
that
amount that
balance
we
out?
spent, July, the bill that we paid Waste Connections for the amount of services for the commercials was $16,519.74, which was directly then billed to the condos that are using the service. So whether you want to take that on, and I think it's been pretty steady for the last couple years. I don't really think we've had any opt out, but again, the services charges are going to change tremendously for the commercial units because it's going to depend on their number of carts, not necessarily on their pickups. So currently now, this is just per pickup. So if they're being picked up 4 times a month, it's that 25 and change. I can't remember the number. 2573 times 4.
yeah, I'm just trying to evaluate which is the overall lower bid.
It's a
Because-
difficult one to evaluate which one's lower because there's so many
We
different
have,
factors.
but we have to use
But
something.
typically residential is I will tell you that typically the residential rate is the kind of the basis
Yeah.
for whom you choose, but
Okay,
doesn't have to be.
And I mean, this is already, it was sticker shock last time we went through this because I think we took out the city subsidies, so it went up quite a bit last year. And this year, it looks like if we continue, we're just about going to double it. So
Well, if we go, sorry,
commercial, what is the average use? I see all of these here with all of these different bin numbers, but is there an average that we would be using there
An average number of carts, is that what
Yes.
you're asking?
for commercial?
I'm gonna refer to Waste Connections on that question. 6 to 10 is about the average number
Okay.
per
For property.
property. Thank you.
Okay. Is the market coming back anymore? Okay.
so we're asking, if I might, I just want to continue. So we're asking the residents to pay $240 or 12 times 12, basically, $144. Yeah, sorry, my math wasn't
Up from 84 currently.
annually for the
Right.
recycling.
Mhm.
I know when I've seen the recyclers in my neighborhood, they're putting it in the same type truck that.
It goes in a rear load truck, but
and
it's still
all
going to their
and
MRF.
it's all compacted, but
Mhm.
that's still,
And then it goes to their MRF in St. Pete, where it gets their
and
process.
I think the previous discussion was 60 to 70% was usable. Was that, or 50%?
50% from what they
50%.
presented last time.
could we ask the speakers to come up to the microphone,
It
please?
was about 50% is what the presentation from a prior meeting. And then approximately 20% is glass and 20% is contaminated. I mean, I remember that about 60% of everything collected is, we have a pretty high, about a 60 to 65% participation rate,
We do.
which is quite high. But you were correct, Commissioner Kerr, the residential rate what we would bill would likely go from $84 for the whole year, $7 a month to $12 a month. So from $84 a year to $144 per year,
All
per
right.
residence.
That if we didn't do any of this, the waste disposal fee that under the sanitation would rise.
Correct. Because all of that would go into the regular garbage.
So the city's expenses would go up. We don't have a feel for what that is though.
We don't.
Plus the tipping fees, 3.6% increase.
I thought it was 6.8.
I'm sorry, 6% increase. There was an increase in the fees per ton at the waste to energy plant as well.
Yes. Started 10-1.
Okay, and this is a 5-year locked-in rate. No changes in the 5 years.
No, they can come back to
Well-
the city with the CPI. I believe I said that correctly.
Annual, right, the consumer
Annual.
pricing index
Yes.
every year, but I mean, certainly based on your direction, there, I mean, with RFPs, there's some room for negotiation.
Mhm.
I would speculate with these, it's very small, but there is a possibility to do that as well. But pretty much those rates are the rates that they're gonna charge and likely a CPI every year.
With the 5-year contract, it gave us the ability to have a lower cost
Right.
for the residential rate.
So the market hasn't come back. Glass that all of our residents are putting in the recycle bin, they're having to pay to get rid of. I'm still of the thoughts that a number of other communities have gone to, and that's for the time being, doing away with recycling. Because a lot of the recycle is going to the same place our truck's going to, and that's landfill and the incinerator. By the time you take glass out of recycle and the other 20% that's already contaminated, there's really not much going to recycle. And apparently the value's not there, or the prices wouldn't be going up like they are.
Yeah, but I think Connections said that the glass, and that we're lucky, we're in Florida, the glass, ours goes down to Sarasota and gets used, so it's still costing money, but it's not being thrown in landfill, it is getting reused to make roads or do something else. So I agree with you with the cost, but I still think we should recycle.
Yeah. Well, and they're paying to get rid of the
Yeah.
glass
Correct.
to be,
And we're paying to get rid.
which
rid of it.
will, which reflects in our prices.
Megan, would they still pick up on Wednesdays, and would that all stay the same with both companies, or that's?
We
up to them?
haven't talked about that. I believe with Waste Connections, if we were to move forward with them, I believe it would stay the same. With Waste Pro, we haven't had those conversations until after direction this evening.
And that wouldn't really make any difference because they're different carts and they're all full, so they
Right.
could do it on a normal garbage day. And
I do know, for example, Treasure Island, they pick up their recycle on the same day they pick up their.
We used to do that,
Right,
and then it got changed to
right,
Wednesday.
it was Tuesday.
It was Tuesday and Tuesday and Third, I don't
Yeah.
remember. I think there was two
I
different.
guess that's a small point. It was just rolling the bins out for one day rather than 2 days.
Right, right.
Okay.
Strictly financially speaking, I would agree with the mayor's point. But we also, with Commissioner Hudson's point of being good stewards of the environment, sounds like it's, it's worth a few dollars to be good stewards of the environment. So,
And also to add, I think just in my experience, we will hear from residents. I think regardless of how we proceed,
Mhm.
but certainly eliminating the recycling, I believe we will get more comments than
I'm sure.
so.
I'm sure.
We would also hear heavily from Pinellas County.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've shot myself in the foot before, so.
There'll be some emotion.
Mhm.
I know. I know. Well,
So you-
the residents that are watching, just be prepared. Your bills will be going up again this year.
And it's a significant percentage increase, but it's not a life-changing number. It's not gonna impact most residents in any real financial hardship. An extra $7, $6, whatever, $5.
And again, we have to remember that amount to some extent would be shifted over to our landfill trash. Not to the extent that it would be, but some of that would be going that way anyway.
Right, so let's make it $2.
Not as horrible.
So your direction, commission?
Well, honestly, if the commercial rates by cart, if our average is 6 to 10, that's kind of a cutoff point. If you don't look at all the figures for 11 through 15 and higher, my personal choice, looking at the differences in cost, would be to have to go to Waste Pro. That's where I'm leaning.
Based on that amount of cards for businesses, Waste Pro is beneficial more for residents and businesses. So I'm leaning towards that as well.
So at this point, I don't have any more questions. If this is something at this point that we would like to go ahead and take to a commission meeting and vote on it.
I would suggest that. I
We-
don't have any more questions.
I guess one question, is there something that the city leaning one way or the other, or is the city allowed to lean one way or the other?
I will.
Of the decision.
Yes, we certainly can provide based on the data that we received and the bids. It's difficult because of the markets, what's been happening since 2018. Many cities, as the mayor stated, have ended recycling. I will tell you, it was not a popular decision to end recycling. Because of my previous city, we decided to do that for 1 year. And then restarted recycling. It's not a popular decision. There are environmental concerns, there are financial concerns from my perspective. I would consider or recommend the lowest bid, or the lower of the two. And we would negotiate with the lower one, bring a recommended agreement back to the commission. And for you to decide whether to proceed with that or not. We do have again, as I said earlier, a very good participation rate. Pinellas County is really looking to Pinellas County government to continue recycling, to promote it, to encourage. At this point, since we did issue an RFP, and again, based on all the data that's been presented, my recommendation would be to go with the lower bid. And again, to negotiate with them and bring an agreement back to the commission.
I have one more question. And you reviewed all these RFPs, these bids,
Mhm.
pretty detailed, I'm sure. Is there anything that sticks out to you? Not the numbers, but the recommendations, anything that really jumps out positively or negatively with either respondent?
Personally, I've worked with Waste Connections since I've been here, so that's almost 8 years. It's been fantastic. I've had some slight issues quite a long time ago, but ever since a new route supervisor was brought into the mix, we've had no issues. With that being said, checking all of the references for Waste Pro, we've also had that same response as well. So that's really all I can say.
Is there a clause in our agreement so that if things aren't going well, we have a 30, 60, 90-day clause to
I
back
believe
out of
that's
our
in the
agreement.
Yeah,
contract.
we will include that.
I
And
think that's in the
And I
current
will add,
contract.
Commissioner, I mean, looking through, both companies are more than capable.
Yes.
And have good references to be able to provide the services. I mean, nothing really stood out. I'm, familiar with both throughout my career, and I think both can do just as good a job as the other.
yeah, my quick review, I mean, I would assume so. So I would suggest that, just as the RFP stated, low man wins. Go from there.
Okay, I would say we move this on to a commission meeting so that we can vote on it then.
I think we had scheduled the November
I
meeting,
believe it's the November, yes.
so we will bring that back too.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Are there any public comments on this item? Okay, thank you.
Oh, I guess you
No.
have one.
Real quick, sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Derek Hunt. I'm the division manager for Waste Pro, and if the city decides to move forward with Waste Pro, you will not regret it. That's for sure. We could provide great service, and we're gonna make sure we take care of you.
Okay, maybe you could throw in like getting a combination street sweeper, recycle truck, and just sweep the streets while you're going through picking up the recycle.
We'll see
That
what
would
we
be a
can do.
good sales pitch.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, next is city manager employment agreement. And I brought this up because with all that has gone on in the past year with our what has happened with inflation and everything else, I have to say personally, I think Robin has been doing an extraordinary job. I know rents have gone up tremendously. Robin lives in town. He walks these streets constantly. I was kind of hoping he could pick up the recycle, but I proposed during the budget session when we were talking about increases for other employees to give Robin $5,000 bonus. I have since learned that we can't do that. What we would have to do is to amend his contract to give him an increase of the $5,000. I would like to know Robin's going to stay. He's got basically a little over a year left on his contract. I would like to see that amendment put in. And if he wanted to, I wouldn't mind even talking about a 1-year extension on it like it is now with that increase. So I'd like to open up the floor for discussion.
So you're thinking, it's not a one-time $5,000, just going to be an increase in salary?
Correct. It'll be an increase in salary to go to give him that over the course of the year.
I have no objection.
Yeah, I'm okay with it too.
And just, if I could just pile on here, I saw Mr. Gomez out there when he probably shouldn't have been during the hurricane. And he was giving us regular updates and responding to emails, but way above and beyond. I was impressed by his extra duty during that time of need.
Absolutely. Even the correspondence we get from Mr. Gomez every week is just way above what I have been used to. I'm very impressed. So if that's okay with everyone, and I don't know how Mr. Gomez would feel about a 1-year extension on that. He may want to think that one over, but
No, thank you. I'm perfectly happy with it. Love the city, love the people, especially those that really come out and have conversations with us. So I've enjoyed the time here. I look forward to several additional more years down the road. So thank you very much.
great.
And I love our staff. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention it. I'm only as successful as the staff is.
You know, and I gotta tell you a quick story, and I know this, you know, I don't want this meeting to get longer and longer. But I will say, I had somebody approach me that had gone into another city hall, which will remain nameless, south of us. And they said when they went in, they were depressed when they walked in the door because of the reception they got there. And when they come to Madeira Beach, everything is upbeat and everybody's gangbusters doing their job, and the whole spirit here has been totally different from what they were used to and what they've run into at other city halls. So I think, Robin, you brought that here. So thank you for that. And I would say then, Mr. Trask, if you could maybe, I don't know how you want to handle this on getting another contract before us and.
Yeah, it'll just be an amendment to the
Amendment.
current contract. So
Okay.
you'll see it'll reference the fact that these two provisions have been changed. It'll increase the salary by $5,000 and extend the contract 1 year. So
Okay.
it'll be something fairly simple and short.
Right.
But can absolutely get it for the next regular meeting.
Okay,
I just need to know, when is the effective date then of the salary increase? Is it effective immediately upon the contract being signed, or do you want it to start as of October 1, for example? I just would like to prepare the contract to reflect some particular date.
Well, I said fiscal year is fine, October 1st, just make it retroactive. That probably would make more sense budget wise, right?
that's okay with me, if that's okay with,
All right, I'll prepare it as of October 1 then. So there'll be some
Okay.
retroactive pay then once the contract amendment goes into play.
okay.
Yeah.
Now, but will that, lengthwise, will that amend the contract for October 1 also, or will it amend it? It will still go from the December date from when it was
It'll be 1 year from
The
the
end.
previous termination date.
good enough?
Through December of 2024.
Yeah.
Or December 19th,
Okay,
2024.
great.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any public comments on this? Okay. Next is a Clarion Consulting Agreement, fiscal year 2023.
And Mayor and Commission, this item is to approve the fiscal 2023 agreement for our finance director, city treasurer agreement. We have outsourced that for the last couple of years. This agreement is to continue with that agreement. And for the next fiscal year, we've been adopting these year by year. He has, and that is to appoint Mr. Andrew Laughlin as our financial services consultant through the company of Clarion. Really the only changes to the agreement are in the fee structure, a slight 2.8% increase from $7,400 a month to $7,600 a month, if I have that correct. And no other changes to the agreement. And so the agreement stipulates the services that Mr. Laughlin would provide, again, serving as the city's finance director and treasurer, overseeing that department, overseeing all the accounting, payroll related, accounts payable, purchasing functions that the finance department is responsible for. We in turn continue to provide the facility for the work to be accomplished, office space, desk, et cetera, and the software to do the work. And again, it's a 1-year term. Be happy
Okay.
to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. I didn't see anything in there about Andrew doing everybody's everybody that works for the city's income taxes for this next year. I thought that might be thrown in there.
You don't want that. I'm not a tax guy.
Yeah, not a tax. And that would be a much higher fee, I'm sure.
And
Any
just for
questions?
clarity's sake, it won't be for adoption of this agreement tonight. It will be
Right.
to put it on the next.
Yeah, I'm
regular
sorry, to
meeting.
bring it at the next, to adopt at the next commission regular meeting. Thank you, John.
Any questions?
I'm for bringing it to a vote the next meeting. Question that I just thought of, we talk about a financial person in our charter. If we continue to do this agreement with the Clarion, do we need to change anything in our charter to allow that?
So you can always change your charter to reflect that it be a person as an employee of the city, or change it to reflect that you allow it for consulting through a consultant's agreement. Right now, obviously, the charter does not mention a consulting agreement, but you legally have the right to do that. It's just that, you don't have that same authority over the employee where you could basically fire him at every regular meeting like the rest of us charter officials. You have a contractual arrangement with his company. So you would have to still meet the contractual provisions. So to answer your question is if you want us to clean up the charter, we can do that and add that as an option to make it absolutely clear. That would require it to hit the next regular election, and we would need to obviously do the ordinance and the ballot resolution and that type of thing. So
Okay, but we're not in conflict with our charter.
we're not in conflict with it.
Okay.
And the only, it's 30 days, right? So
We
it's-
can
it's not-
terminate within 30 days.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, all right.
There's a clause, a termination clause in the agreement.
I'm perfectly okay with the way it is right now. I don't think bringing it to a chart and put it on a ballot will probably confuse people more than help them. So
Okay.
if there's no objection, I don't really see any. We've never been in that much of a rush to terminate somebody, without having a discussion about it within 30 days anyway. So I'm perfectly okay with the way it is right now.
Read.
If the staff recommends it. I know as far as on the board, all the numbers that you provide. It sounds perfect, makes perfect sense.
That's, I'm fine with moving it forward for a vote for the next meeting. Thank you. Is there any public comment on this? Okay, next is 2023 State of Florida Legislative Appropriations. And I asked to put this on here. I have worked with Representative Cheney past couple of years, and we've done quite well. And I know the big ticket item we really need, and that would cut expenses for the city and save our equipment, and that's for a public works building. That's the main appropriation that I would like to see us go for. Now, we can also go for others, for streets, storm sewers and whatnot, but the really big ticket item would be a public works building. And floor is open to talk about that, talk about some other things that people might like to discuss or get on there.
I agree with the Public Works Building. I'm nervous that we are doing enough other things in the coming year with the groins, the dredging and everything else, that maybe we just stick to the Public Works Building unless.
Yeah, but this funding wouldn't be until 2024. If it goes through the legislature this year and doesn't get vetoed. So even if we go for this,
Okay, we can go for something else too.
it's going to be 2024 before we even think about anything being hit. And then we've got to go through engineering and design and everything else.
Okay. We do have this as or have had it as a capital project and will continue. But I completely agree with the mayor. We're looking to obtain any state appropriation, certainly very helpful to help us out to get a building, certainly to protect our public works assets and all the equipment that we have. Did you want to come up? We've, since it is a capital project, we have been looking for locations, looking as to what types of buildings Megan's distributing just a rough and architectural of what a building would look like to give us a starting point. And again, very early in the entire process, but just wanted to share this with you. And we completely agree. This is something that we should look at our appropriations for a state appropriation, excuse me, as well as grants that might be available. In addition to our funding as well. So this, and if you want to explain maybe, but it's about
So the dimensions of this are 125 feet long by 50 feet wide. An interesting part that you will see on here is there is a fire department day room. The reason for that being is for a quick response vehicle. Fire chief asked me if there would be a possibility, if there was room to put a day room so that we could service the Seminoles because it goes by GPS for responses. So we're losing out on a lot of calls. He could give you more details on that. So we've worked that into our floor plan. There are a couple changes. I just got this today. So there's a couple changes on here that I'm gonna make just by adding doors and whatnot, but this has enough space. The last bay is large enough to fit the fire truck and the garbage trucks for service, not being kept on the Public Works current site.
So I see kitchen here and conference room. Is that basically going to be more of a break room
But yes,
for all the?
yeah, and then we'll have the ability to have a conference room over
If you
there
need
if
it.
needed, yes, but
Okay.
more for an air conditioned break room.
Okay, and you'll have the ability to drive all the way through.
Correct.
Looks good. Yep, that's a building.
He's working on the exterior design now.
Okay. Hopefully we can make something that, particularly since that's the entrance to the city, look
We'll make it pretty.
architecturally nice with some green landscaping around it.
absolutely.
We will do our best.
Yep.
And what is this? What is the company? Silk Greenhouse? Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other questions? No?
For me, is there any other appropriations that anyone would like to discuss?
Yeah, the hardening of our power grid. The undergrounding of our power grid. We came very close to getting hit with some very high winds. We already have power issues throughout the residential areas. To embrace a storm that similar to what just came through down south, an underground grid would be very beneficial. Speaking with Duke Energy, they on a regular basis, I say every few years, they'll look at different areas, and I think this area is coming up for hardening, whether it's above ground or below ground. So there may be some opportunity for grant money from them as well. So if we combine the two, it might be financially responsible to get that on the plan.
I know undergrounding is tremendously expensive. Megan, do you have a current figure of what it's costing us a mile to underground? And a lot of what this is going to end up doing, we would have to have special assessments to be able to accomplish this
I
in our
believe
residential areas.
to finish, I can't remember the numbers. I think from the most recent task two that we just approved, that was just for the construction phase was $2.3
It was over 2 million.
million, and that's from 144th to 129th. That does not
Wow.
cover the cost of Duke Energy's binding cost estimate, which is, we're looking at about $2.1 million.
If we never look into it, it'll never get done.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
And moving forward with undergrounding, I actually, Duke Energy, while working on Gulf Boulevard, designed Gulf Lane for undergrounding. So now I actually have those, and we're gonna meet with them to actually put the conduit in the ground while we do that project. And then that will save us in the long run.
No, it's certainly something we can begin to have those
Absolutely.
conversations with our delegation and just begin to put that on the table,
Well,
because
I-
it is a multi-year project also likely and not as complex. Well, it could be in a residential area versus a commercial, but
Mhm.
given that we're looking at quite a few of our fingers, I mean, I'm sure, I mean, it's obviously doable. It's just a little bit more complex than if you're on, say, you're inside in Seminole or Largo where you don't have a little bit of the challenges that we do.
Well, many of the poles are well off the streets in the residential areas, and they would be back. So in the residential, in the ground, not necessarily in the streets. I do agree, if you're doing a new street, you should be putting in you should be roughing in for that infrastructure,
Mhm.
but I don't think it should be an end all that if the streets are already done.
No, it's not, but we have to have easements. So whenever we step up for the transformers or any type of equipment, we have to have easements. So even with Gulf Lane, we're gonna do our best to work that out because we're ready to bid out Gulf Lane. But we still have to have those signed easements from those property owners, because with some areas, Crystal Islands, for instance, you have 20 foot of right of way. But with Duke Energy, they don't want their equipment in the right of way, in the FDOT right of way. I'm not exactly sure why, but in most properties along Gulf Boulevard where those equipments will go, they're working on the easements with the property owners currently right now.
Okay, but I'm just saying, I think that this should be in discussion and
Absolutely.
from the state is see what grants are available, especially since it's top of mind
Mhm.
with Ian coming through. I think it's I would like to promote it.
Sure.
I, Commissioner Kerr, I am 10,000, you probably heard me pontificate up here about this a million times. I'm 10,000% in agreement with you. And even this is a 10-year project going forward. I know Duke wants to start having the discussion. I know Megan's already probably had initial discussions with them. I'm all for this. And I think that, like I said, even if it spreads out, it's not going to be able to do it all at once. I lost my kazoo when we did Crystal Island and when we had the thing wide open and paid $6 million more than we had to. And then we didn't put the utilities underground. I have a feeling it's going to be tough to get any budget money this year. I think most of that money is going to go south this year, and rightfully so. But you're right. I think the discussions have to be had. We got to know what the number is, and then we got to try to prepare for that number, because I think for a community like this, if we put this in for, I mean, this is something I think that residents would get behind, that even if we were going to bump their millage rate up a little bit in order to pay for something like this or give an assessment, this is well worth it. I can't tell you how many times, whether it's my store or whether my house, the wind blows and it goes out, and it's not even a bad storm. We got really lucky this time, and we should probably start pushing forward. And I'm glad you brought that up for this, because I think this is something we definitely need to speak about. Oh, by the way, Robin, I did have one more question. Are we still having our legislative representative? Are we paying somebody this year to be
Yeah, we included a lobbyist.
a
It's
lobby?
included
I'm
in
sorry,
our-
that was the word I was looking for.
Yeah, in our
lobbyist.
budget, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to ask? Appropriation?
So have you got a dollar amount you'd like to put in for that?
For undergrounding?
Mhm. Bearing in mind, Ian just hit South Florida and that's where most of the money's going to be going, I'm quite sure. I don't know that we'll get it even on the Public Works building.
Well,
You know,
it would be hard to just throw out a number without having a direction on what we wanted to do or how we wanted to accomplish it.
Right, or
I
what
think we-
area we would
Yeah,
like.
Right,
we're-
so if
we're-
I don't, if I don't have a figure, I can't.
I get that. I'm just,
So,
okay, we have to have a plan and sit down and maybe that should be
Yeah, that'll,
a little,
So I'll just throw this out there. Our next road project area that we actually have state appropriations money for is this area, Area 6, which is City Hall, Winn-Dixie, you have Madeira Way. I don't know if we want to try to link these together with roadway projects. That might make it a little bit easier.
I'm sure Duke could help us with some budgets.
Yeah, we can get that from Duke.
yeah, and I had mentioned a while back too, finishing 150th. Part of it was done by the developer, I think, on the north side of the road, but the south side
With the condos, yeah.
is, to start getting at least the main corridors where power is coming into us protected. And
We can look at that as well. If
aesthetically
like to
for the
do-
city itself.
we would like to do main corridors first. It
Right.
actually makes it a lot easier for the feeders
Right.
going back into the neighborhoods.
I know we had
This-
that meeting with Duke Energy. They'd be more than happy to put together some
Yep.
budgets for us, I think. And if we looked at it as a 5-year plan or, let's start with that. If it's gonna be $10 million over 5 years, maybe it's a 10-year plan. I don't know. But at least put a budget forward and you're not gonna get it if we don't ask for it.
Correct.
I think Commissioner Kerr just volunteered to.
I can do that.
Okay. All right, anything else? I think that's going to, the Public Works building is a big one. Any other things anyone wants to discuss for appropriations to try to get it? By the way, I will tell you, John's Pass was the first time they've given appropriations to dredge an inlet. That we're good? Okay. All right. Any public comment on this? Next is Beach Groin Renourishment Project.
So Mayor and Commission, as Ms. Wepfer and our engineering consultant, our engineer of record come up. We are, I think we've begun the permitting process, so that's good news to begin. But we are thankful again to have received the matching grant, and we will continue to look for similar grants and other funding sources, as I've already said. So turn it over to
Good evening.
Tool and Associates.
Al Carrier with Dool and Associates. What Megan's passing out is the actual construction plans that are being used for permitting purposes. And then there's also an exhibit in there from Foster Consulting that kind of shows the erosion control line that he had developed through his models. We started the project back in April of last year with an investigative survey. So we had hired a local contractor to assist in that. When we first started this project and started to budget it, I think Mr. Aherns was here as your Public Works Director a couple of years ago. We had to make some assumptions, and one of those assumptions was that the groins were only 150 feet in length. And that's the best information we could find at the time, based on aerial photographs and information that we could read upon. When we actually went out there and did the investigative survey last April, we had set points. So we knew the end point out in the water, and then we set a point, surveyor set a point for the contractor, 150 feet up, go ahead and start digging so we can find the end of the groin. Well, we found that point, and a lot of times they kept digging. And if you look in the plan set there, you'll see that some of those groins actually extend 270 feet back. So we did find some of the ends. A lot of the ends we didn't find because they're either under buildings or beyond the bulkhead line or the coastal construction control line, or under really sand dunes, well-established sand dunes. So we stopped short of that. We thought we had enough, ended up getting enough information. Mr. Foster had ran the models. He went back to I think it was a 1974 model and then a 1997 model. And in your document, you can see, let me back up. I apologize for you guys getting this so soon. So if you want to look at it and you have questions or something after this, go ahead and give me a call and, we can meet and talk through it. But this document that looks like the squiggly lines, it shows the profile of the groin.
Maybe it's this one.
Yeah. So they're all pretty much the same, but generally speaking, the dark heavy line on top is the profile of the beach over the years that you see on the left-hand column. And I believe that starts in 1997, goes all the way to 2022. And you can see that the beach really hasn't changed that much, maybe a foot or two in elevation. What the model shows, you see this red strike line through everything, which shows the 100-year storm erosion line. So the worst model or the worst storm event shows that red line, everything below that red line, or excuse me, above that red line would be lost during a storm event. And the groins that you see on there, the boxes, are an actual depiction of the groin and profile. So that line in every one of his cross sections, he did 7 cross sections for our project area, shows that the backside or the landward side of the groins would be exposed anywhere from a foot to 2 or 3 feet. So that told us that we need to fortify those groins as far back as we can. And if you look on the other set of drawings, the actual construction drawings, you can see where we're fortifying those groins sometimes back beyond the vegetation line and back to the coastal construction control line. There's 2 locations right in front of Archibald where we're going beyond the CCCL line because there's not sand dunes there and it's accessible. Our original estimate was based on the groins, as I mentioned, being 150 feet long. We're going to fortify each side, so each groin would be 300 linear feet of seawall, if you will, fortifying that groin. We came up with a higher estimate based on a more complex wall design. Our original estimate was, I think, around 3.2 million for construction, with the fortified wall at 6,000 linear feet, 60. I have it on here. At 6,600 linear feet. When we went through and did our survey, we realized that we now have 8,400 linear feet. The good news is the wall design isn't as complex as we originally thought it was going to be. So we went back and looked at the numbers. We believe the numbers are going to come in a little less than what was originally budgeted. So there should be a little bit of savings there from that 3.2 number. We would, what we did consider was rebuilding the sand dunes. So with that a little extra money, $300,000-400,000, that will be utilized to rebuild the sand dunes where we have to cut into the sand dunes and fortify the wall that's buried. So for instance, the sand dunes, if you go up at the vegetation line, that wall may be buried 3 or 4 feet in the ground. They're going to have to excavate that, fortify the wall, the existing groin with a new sheet pile, concrete it in, and then rebury that wall, and then reestablish the sand dune where they have to cut into the sand dune.
I'm scratching my head trying to understand why we would go that far back, Al. It's been covered with sand for years and years. So convince me that we need to go that far back, because You know, my house is 70 years old. And my foundation is 70 years old, but I don't need to redo my foundation.
So the model that was run, and I'll refer you back to this drawing that shows the groins.
Okay.
The worst event that we had, that Joe had found from 1974, that when you strike that red line, that's the erosion line. So everything above that would be washed away in that particular storm event. It exposes that groin to the backside, the landward side of that groin. So from that model, it shows that we need to fortify that groin that's existing. We don't know what kind of condition, well, we do know what kind of condition is. When we were excavating it, we could see that the king piles somewhere were actually broken off. The panels in between were either missing or broken or just collapsed and sunk. So if we ever got hit with a storm event, we want to make sure that we're fortifying the wall to the best of our ability to meet that storm event. We talked about just fortifying what's exposed, but what would happen if we got hit with a major storm event? That portion of the wall that's still sticking out that we fortified may stay, but the rest of the wall behind it that wasn't fortified may wash away, or most likely would wash away, and would end up losing larger portions of the beach.
Yeah. By the way, all that sand in John's Pass that we're going to dredge, that's a great place for it, is to fortify the beach and help build a dune along there, I think. I'm not an expert, but just makes good sense to me to put it on our beach and keep it.
I don't know all the dynamics. I do know that the state takes claim to that sand once it's dredged. If the last time I believe that area was dredged in the past, the dredge contractor had to pay for that sand. He had to actually purchase that sand from the state to utilize it somewhere else. So we can certainly talk about that during the permitting process. If that sand can be utilized to reapplied on our beach.
Which we will.
Yeah, because, I know I've been told by the county, that's y'all's problem, so.
Does that mean it's
Depends
ours?
on
Sounds
which
like it's
hat they
our
wanna-
sand.
Yeah, it sounds like it's our sand
Doesn't
if it's
sound like a
our
does
problem.
it? Yeah.
Al, thank you. Tell you what, somebody start the timer because I'll talk to you for like 3 hours on this because I am completely fascinated by this whole project. First and foremost, I was out there the other day during the storm when all the water was set back, and am I reading this correct that there's 22 groins that you're going to work on? Is that
Yeah, so the original grant was for 22 groins. The last groin that's directly across from like 137th
Right.
Avenue Circle, it comes and goes.
It's
Right.
covered right now.
And so I think in the proposal that we gave Megan, we accounted for that. So if it's, and it's accounted for in the cost, in the price. So if it's exposed,
And that's
I'm
actually
sorry.
the 22nd one as well. So the
that's
one
137th is the 22nd one.
22nd.
Is there anything south of that?
Yes.
There are. They
And
go
we're
all the
not
way to
gonna,
the
we're
pass.
not gonna
They're
mess
buried.
with those.
They're all buried.
We're not gonna even, okay.
We
Okay.
actually,
And there's 22 from 137th to 154th,
55th.
155th.
And actually during the surveying, we actually tried to locate the one just south of the 137th. We
Right.
couldn't find it.
Couldn't even
We
find it.
went 300 feet. We dug down because they're typically about the same length apart.
Right.
We couldn't find it.
It was fascinating. I mean, when the water got sucked out, you could see those things out
You
there.
could
That,
totally walk around.
right,
Yeah.
that was pretty well. So the idea is to just build them out the way they are, or are we going to make them higher? What is the, just kind of,
Same, basically 6 inches higher. And in the plan set, there's a detail of that, but we have the existing groin. It's a kingpin. It's a concrete kingpin. There's panels that fit in between those king pile. We're proposing to come in with sheet vinyl like you would use on a seawall, a real thick, heavy duty Vanguard product. We're going to push it down both sides of that existing groin. The panels themselves get through bolted every corrugation with a 3/4 inch stainless steel bolt and plate. And then we will wash out or dig out 2 feet of the sand from the top of the groin down and fill that with structural concrete. The top of the groin will have a little bit of a hump to it, like a 2-inch chamfer, if you will, to allow for drainage, and it'll smooth the entire groin out. So technically, the groin's growing 6 inches taller, but for the most part, it's same size, same location, same shape.
Okay, now is this gonna be, we did a project, I'm not gonna say similar to this, probably in a smaller scale, 8 years ago?
2013, yes.
Okay. Now, is this similar, are we doing the similar, or this is all new? We're going,
So in 2013, we had a contractor go out because of the groin, the king pile were all busted up. The concrete was busted up and had rebar sticking out. We went and got jackets, fiberglass jackets, and we married the jackets around the existing groin and filled that void space with epoxy. It's like a real high dense 2-part epoxy to keep people from impaling themselves or running into them, into the rough concrete.
cool, thank you.
So, yeah, if there's any way we can lengthen them at all, like another 50 feet.
We had asked and the answer was no.
Because that would help with our sand issue in the pass itself too. There are other communities north of us that are begging for groins. So we're kind of lucky in that aspect.
We're also going for exemptions with Army Corps and DEP because of the 2013. We were issued exemptions, so if we stay in that same footprint, we've already had pre-permit meetings and they're pretty confident that we're gonna get those. So the permitting process is much shorter.
And yeah,
So you can't go out any further, but you can come back in further?
We're not going back in further. We're just fortifying what's there. And Army Corps would not let us go out any further. They even hemmed and hawed when we told them that the thickness of the panel that we're putting in, the sheet panel, is about 8 to 9 inches that we were thinking at the time. They hemmed and hawed because they didn't want us to widen it anymore. And during the conversation, we're like, well, how else are we gonna do it unless we destroy what's actually there, which doesn't make sense. Just fortify what's there.
So the existing groin is actually the anchor for,
Yes, it's
or,
like
and not new groin, we're fortifying what's there and-
Correct.
and building on.
kind of like in front of your existing seawall, right? You put the sheet in front of it, you put concrete in front of it. You marry the two, the old and the new, and now you have a even stronger system that you had originally.
Now, you mentioned that the original design was a thicker, heavier, but you changed the design and were able to get more length, more overall footage.
Or bang for our buck, if you will.
Right.
yes.
What are you giving up on the original design?
The original design, we thought we would need a thicker concrete cap with steel, rebar all tied in. But after doing the modeling and doing the structural analysis, it's not required.
Have these been done before somewhere else that have experience? that you can
I
reference
believe
back?
Foster had done something similar in South Carolina or North Carolina. He had just completed a project like 6 months ago up there. On a bigger scale. I think those walls were 10 or 12 feet high
Much larger.
and went further out into the
But nothing,
Atlantic
nothing
Ocean.
10, 15, 20 years ago that.
No,
that-
just recently.
what was the Corps' reasoning for not wanting to lengthen the groins?
During our conversation, one of the scientists from the Army Corps had mentioned that they didn't want to lengthen them because it would change the sediment transport from the sand, the way it moves now. And if we wanted to lengthen them, it would probably be a very long, costly process of modeling, and they probably wouldn't permit it. So they have in their head some idea of how that sediment transport works up and down our beach and how it nourishes sand south of here.
What it wouldn't do is it wouldn't let more sand into John's Pass. For a while anyhow. But I know the Corps can be difficult to deal with sometimes.
And very, very slow.
So what's the process? We have a budget, we have a grant, we have matching funds and all that. Do we have a contractor that's actually contracted to do this? This is going to go out to bid?
It's gonna go out to bid. So we're thinking probably go out to bid in the next 3 or 4 weeks while permits are pending. We have been in contact with, it's gonna go through Army Corps, FDEP, and Pinellas County. Our office has contacted all of those people that we had the pre-application with back in April and May. They know some of the plans have already been let out. They know it's coming. They've been told we're gonna expedite it. So we're pretty confident that the plans that we have are gonna be permittable. So we want to go ahead and put out an RFP, get the lowest bid contractor, like any other public works CIP project that you have.
Have any of these contractors helped you with any budgeting?
A couple local contractors have, and Foster's Group, who does a lot of the structural analysis for contractors up and down the west coast of Florida, have also chimed in.
So we feel pretty confident with the
We feel
budget.
pretty confident. We even talked to a supplier. So
Thank you. Great work.
Okay, so groins work, I always consider groins protect from sand drift down the coast. You guys are talking about storm in your modeling. So is that just since that sand is going to disappear anyway, but we need to strengthen the groin itself to make sure the groin's integrity? Or does the groin actually help in a hurricane or some big event?
both. So the way the groins are now, the profile, when you look at the profile drawings, right, you can see over the last like decade, the sand really hasn't changed that much, relatively speaking. A few feet, like we mentioned, groin at 137, sometimes exposed, maybe 20 or 30 feet,
If that.
and sometimes it's completely covered. So I think we're in that flux. But the fortification of the groins ultimately will protect against a major storm event, or if we had a big storm event.
Because it breaks down the wave action?
I wouldn't, no. No, it
I mean, you can
holds
see
the
how
sand
it
in
would prevent the
place.
sand from drifting.
It helps
I'm not
the
sure
sand
how
from
it-
transporting down the
Yeah, it
beach.
doesn't necessarily stop the wave breaking, but definitely holds the sand in place.
It does dissipate the energy from the wave. So if you do have a storm that has
Yeah,
waves coming in
cross.
on an angle to the
Yeah.
beach, it would dissipate
That's kind of what I
Yes.
was getting at.
that energy, yes.
I think that's what's your point.
No, it's just cool.
No. Okay, I don't have any more questions. I
Are-
think,
So would you like us to move forward with the recommendation from the engineers? Okay,
Get it
so
out to
that's,
bid.
we will get it out to
Yes.
bid as soon as possible.
Yeah.
yes,
Yes.
Thank you.
gotta be done. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Any public comment on this? Next is John's Pass Village Activity Center Plan presentation. Jenny, are you all ready?
I think so.
Okey-doke. Floor is yours.
The Johns Pass Village Activity Center Plan. This presentation is going to be informal, so just ask any questions as we go. We also have Dave Healy here.
I'm not sure your mic is
Oh,
on. Jen,
Maybe it's a
or
little too far.
away. There you go.
Okay. So this presentation is just informal, so if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to ask them. We also have Dave Healy here. He's been essential in assisting staff with this plan. Dave, if you want to introduce yourself.
Mayor and Commissioners, Manager Gomez, thanks for the opportunity to work with you and the staff. It's been a pleasure for me over these last several months to help Jenny and Linda and Andrew on this project. I am a city planner. I've been here in Pinellas County since 1977, working with and for local government, and have both worked on preparing such plans and reviewing them on behalf of the Pinellas Planning Council. And it's something I think that is important to the city. I know you've dealt with this on and off over the years, and hope I can be a help to you and the staff as you move forward with it.
And we presented this at the Planning Commission last month. And there's a few changes that we made to the presentation. So once we get your input tonight, we plan to bring this back to Planning Commission for their recommendation to the BOC. And then after that, it'll come to you. And then it'll have to go to Pinellas County, Fort Pinellas. And then after that, the state and back to you for final. So that's just the basics of the process. What is John's Pass Village Activity Center Plan? This is a plan that protects the character and uniqueness of John's Pass Village. The plan would ensure redevelopment and new development is compatible with the existing development patterns. John's Pass Village has been saddled with inconsistent land use for decades. This plan harmonizes the Madeira Beach Comp Plan and countywide plan together.
If I can just jump in, Jenny and I are going to tag team this, if that's okay, keep it informal. Just a couple of related points of emphasis, I think, with what Jenny's described as the kind of the threefold purpose of the plan. And you might ask, residents might ask, John's Pass Village has been there a long time. It is an activity center for all practical purposes. And why is this important? And from our standpoint, it's important for a couple of reasons. One, it will help to establish the formal legal foundation for what is there and offer additional protection for the uses and density that are in place that maybe aren't accounted for in the plan. And secondly, it will establish or promote that legal foundation and basis in consistency with the countywide plan, which is a requirement ultimately that we do that. So a lot of what we're going to go through and walk you through a lot of detail, it may be a good idea to kind of step back from that. What are we about? What are we trying to do? We're going to talk a lot about comparisons between your current plan and the county-wide plan and how both of those or each of them relate then to the proposed plan for John's Pass Village. So that's kind of the bigger picture here of what we're struggling with.
Looking at the southern end of Madeira Beach, this area has always been a center for tourism. Beginning in 1914, when Mitchell Beach Hotel replaced the 1912 homestead and the surrounding land was subdivided for vacation cottages. Throughout the years, tourism attractions and commercial and charter fishing developed throughout the village area. Many of the cottages were either converted into commercial shops or demolished for parking, and some of these still remain as temporary lodging. Visit St. Pete Clearwater releases monthly, quarterly, and annual reports. Madeira Beach is consistently in the top 3 communities visited. The numbers on the right of the slide are from the 2021 annual report. This shows the types of visitors, the percentage of visitors to Madeira Beach in contrast with other Pinellas County communities and rankings. As you can see, Madeira Beach consistently comes in at number 2 or number 3. This is the same for 2020 and for most of the annual studies. Madeira Beach was also Traveler's Choice number 9 best beach in the United States in 2021. As some of you might remember, last year we had 2 public meetings or public workshops and a survey to gather input from the public on ways forward with the inconsistencies between the county and city land uses. The main takeaways were limiting the activity center surrounding John's Pass Village instead of all of Gulf Boulevard, providing for development and redevelopment consistent with the character of the area, needs for adequate parking to support existing businesses, and support of zoning for design detail, which will come later after the land use.
Sorry, if I could just stick in real quick, will there be more meetings now that we're starting over again for the general public to be involved in another survey for input into this?
So at the moment, what we see going forward, is we have this workshop tonight. And then based on your input, we plan to take this to the Planning Commission next month for their recommendation, their initial recommendation to BOC. And then it would go to BOC for the first reading.
So in there, I guess a resident would have to attend the planning commission or something like that, planning meeting or something.
Yes,
So we're not gonna have another town meeting like we did before a year ago.
we don't have anything planned at the moment for that. So it would just be the Planning Commission meeting and the BOC meeting.
Thank you.
The land use with the county and city comprehensive plan generally consists of intensities, densities, and allowed uses. This slide here demonstrates the floor area ratio, which we will also talk about as FAR. And this is how we measure the intensity. At the basics, FAR is the ratio between land area and the building size. So if you take an FAR of 0.5, which you can see in the slide, half of the lot is taken up by the building, and it's a one-story building. The examples on the lower row, right here, shows if the land was 100% covered by the building, and this upper row shows if the building is exactly half the land was covered by the building. So of course you have building setbacks and the zoning, so it's going to be something mixed between these two rows. And here's a general example of what a 0.55 FAR looks like in the real world. This type of development is appropriate for more automobile-oriented development. You can see half the lot is open, the other half is a one-story building. And this FAR 0.55 is what the land use at the county level allows for most of Johns Pass Village Activity Center, which is not consistent with the current development or
And
development that would fit or match the character of the village. Yes,
I stop you there for a moment.
sure.
I think part of this task here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is, as you mentioned, to bring the FAR from what it is on paper to what it actually is.
Yes.
Do you have any documents or any maps, any visual displays that would show, compare the two? Not what you're proposing, but what is actually existing and what is actually on paper as allowed, not grandfathered, but what's on in the zoning. Do you have that prepared, or is that something that could be prepared?
It can be, Commissioner. What we have looked at is both a range of the densities and intensities and floor area ratio by what we'll describe here in a minute as character districts, the areas, separate areas within the activity center. And specifically, we've looked at, the example Jenny's showing you is not hypothetical because it has some real meaning here as we go through this. Looked at, for example, the existing high end of the floor area ratio in existing Johns Pass Village. And in all 6 of the character districts, there are examples where the existing floor area ratio exceeds, in some cases by a considerable amount, the existing permitted floor area ratio under the countywide plan. Part of our dilemma is that that is different and it's less than what the current city plan allows. So we have a twofold objective. One, better recognize what is in fact there. And secondly, to provide some accommodation for the opportunity to revitalize and redevelop such that the arrangement or the relationship between the density and intensity for residential and temporary lodging is in relationship to the permitted floor area ratio. Oftentimes, those things don't sync, and you may say, well, we permit 20 units an acre for residential or 50 for temporary lodging. But if they exceed the floor area ratio, you never get to those standards. So the two need to work in unison, is what we're trying to say. We can have an honest debate about whether that's enough or too much, but that's what we're trying to do with those.
Well, that's basically my point, is actually to have three. And I'm getting ahead of you, because
okay.
it's a next slide, I think,
That's
that you were
fine.
bringing up. To have three land use maps existing per zone currently and what's proposed. Because I think that is, any pushback that you have to protect the business owners, protect the residents, and any pushback you get is going to be defined by what's being proposed versus, I think, what's existing, not necessarily what is written in the zoning as permitted. I think the two land use maps that are going to get the most criticism are going to be what's proposed versus what's existing there now.
Understand that, and it's a legitimate point, very valid. I would just add, though, that when we're doing the plan, we need to try and anticipate not just what's there, but what might be there that would be acceptable and logical as development evolves over the next.
Sure, and I think
however
that's where
many
the
years.
discussion,
Sure.
that's where you start getting into the
Yeah.
real
I do have
discussion.
some specific numbers I can give you here in a minute when we get to.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's
Go ahead.
fine.
That's okay.
That's what we need to hear.
All right, so we have three major maps and rules that we consider in planning. First, we have the county. This is the countywide future land use map, as you can see on the left, and the countywide plan, future land use, and their rules. So we have the county's maps and their rules. And then we also have the city's comprehensive plan that also has land use in the comp plan and also has a future land use map. That's what you see on the right of this slide. And then we also have the code of ordinances and zoning maps. And that's more of the nitty gritty. What are the setbacks, accessory structures, your fence height, dimensions, all of that. That's in the code of ordinance. So all of these have to be consistent together. We can be more restrictive than the counties, but we cannot be less. So if you look here in this slide, we have the county's map, our comprehensive land use map, and their rules, their intensities, that's the FAR, and their densities. You have residential and temporary lodging. And it's just a comparison of both of these plans.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. I'll jump in here. Not to belabor the semantics, but we don't want to confuse. The county, unincorporated county has their plan, just like Madeira Beach has your plan for the incorporated city. The countywide plan that we're talking about is a creature of a special act of the state legislature. It's administered by the Forward Pinellas. You have a representative on the Forward Pinellas board. And then that process is overseen by the Board of County Commissioners, sitting in their separate capacity or wearing a separate hat as the countywide planning authority. So what we're talking about is how the city plan aligns with the countywide plan. The Pinellas County plan is a separate animal, just like your city plan is, and they too have to be compliant with the countywide plan. The maps that Jenny has shown here begin to identify some of the issues. When you look at the maps at first glance, they look pretty similar. They cover the same area, more or less the same colors for the same area, but they do mean different things. There are different names for the categories, which can be confusing to folks. And certainly at the heart of the issue is the difference in density and intensity. And the example that we'll refer to throughout that is probably the most problematical, that needs the most attention, is in the countywide plan, the retail and services category, the first one in the column on the left, allows for a maximum floor area ratio of 0.55. That's comparable to the illustration that Jenny provided of kind of a strip center, single story building on about half the lot, the other half of the lot devoted to parking. That's not the character of Johns Pass Village. And your own plan, the corresponding commercial general category allows a slightly higher floor area ratio, almost twice as much, as does the residential office retail category that's part of the activity center area. So just quickly, without getting too far down in the weeds here, one of the issues we want to try and reconcile is find that right sweet spot for a floor area ratio that works for Johns Pass Village that's within the parameters of the Pinellas County plan, Pinellas County-wide plan. And how do we do that? The problem over the years has been that there weren't categories that fit particularly well. Isn't that anybody did anything wrong here, or probably not with the county either, but they don't match. And the next slide that Jenny has shown shows where the orange striping at the top, the existing countywide plan categories that apply now and what those standards are. The green striped areas at the bottom show an alternative that we've looked to resolve our problems or our issues and use as part of the activity center plan. When the countywide plan was amended, I think around 2015 or so, they created a series of categories called activity centers. And there are 4 different levels or subcategories within the activity center, from an urban to a major, to a community center, to a neighborhood center. And so each of those has a different purpose, a different locational characteristics, and different standards that go with it. And we've looked to the one that we think best fits Johns Pass Village, which is the community center. It is designed to accommodate a tourist destination and business center, as well as the accompanying temporary lodging and then residential use. It highlights here some of those density standards. We'll dive into those in more detail here in a minute. But that's where we've looked to under this hierarchy of the countywide plan to find a category that will work for us. As Jenny said, we can be more restrictive, and we propose to be, than those maximum parameters under the countywide plan. But what we're proposing is, if and when the city commission approves the activity center plan and a corresponding local amendment to put the activity center on your future land use plan map, we need to amend then, seek an amendment to the countywide plan for them to do the same thing, to mirror what we're doing locally. Process, as Jenny said, if you choose to adopt an ordinance here first, at first reading, to approve that plan map amendment and the activity center plan, it then needs, and I'm jumping ahead of myself now, to go to Forward Pinellas and the Board of County Commissioners for their approval of the amendment to their plan before it would come back to you to ratify and have a second reading on the amendment to the city plan. So we'll talk about that process in detail. It isn't really as complicated as it sounds, but it does take time and some effort.
I'd also like to point out that the activity center land use designation really does provide for more flexibility. You see it in more like unique Main Street type areas in Pinellas County. Gulfport has it. Some other barrier islands have activity centers. It just allows you to be more flexible with the land use and for us to really create what we want.
Good point, Jenny. The next slide on the activity center subcategories, don't need to explore this in detail, but this is how the countywide plan structures these. And you can see there's a framework, both in terms of the standards that apply to those individual subcategories and why it would fit, we believe, for Johns Pass Village. If you look at the table 2 out of their plan, it links the future secondary corridor, which Gulf Boulevard is, a future secondary transit corridor. And as you follow that down in the middle of that center column, it is the community center. So when you hear us use the term community center, that's just their language, their lingo, if you will, for the subclassification. For our purposes, it's an activity center and it would fit into that category. A corresponding amendment to their future land use plan will be to the land use strategy map, which is the map on the right. This is how they depict where the existing activity centers are. And simply said, Johns Pass Village is missing in action there. And needs to be added to the plan. They have already approved similar plans in Treasure Island that shows on the map in St. Pete Beach. And you see the other major centers ranging from downtown St. Pete to Clearwater to other smaller centers. So there are a number of these throughout the county. You're not unique or different in suggesting it. But it does seem to be an appropriate strategy for Johns Pass Village that, as Jenny said, we can kind of tailor the guidelines to fit what we see as there and what we see the need to be looking forward. The next map and slide show what the activity center delineation would be on the countywide plan and those specific standards. Just quickly, the maximum density permitted under that community center level activity center is 90 units an acre. The maximum temporary lodging units is 150, and the maximum floor area ratio is 3.0. It's an area of 27 acres. And
Mr.
fits
Bewley,
well.
can you tell me how this compares to our current density in those areas?
It's considerably more, much higher.
So it's allowing for a lot more density.
It would, but understand, Commissioner, this is the maximum limits under the countywide category that they administer. We have the prerogative, and we are proposing to you that we limit the density more specifically within those outside limits. And again, the principle is we can be more restrictive. We can't go outside those limits and qualify for that category.
Right. I'm looking at the our plan development code, furtherance of the historic desired low density character of the community. How does this activity further that? It's gonna increase, right? It's gonna increase the density.
It will increase somewhat in
Yeah,
different ways for different uses. But again, the whole point of having an activity center is to encourage a cohesive, consolidated focal point in a limited area that is a destination for tourism and residents and business, and is outside the framework or given special recognition beyond that overall policy in your comprehensive plan.
sure. But by calling it, designating it as a activity center, you said community, I'm sorry, what was the subheading?
Community center, yes.
Community center. There's nothing that stops us from going that high.
That's correct, if you chose to.
Thank
So
you.
we can be more restrictive than this, and that's what we have written in the plan for y'all to review. We've actually created character districts.
I think you'll see in a minute, Commissioner, how we've tried to,
Yeah.
how we've tried to do that.
So this actually is more restrictive than that community center designation. This is just the maximums that the county allows under the community center, activity center.
And that's not to
plan
say that
use.
they would permit that here or somewhere else, only that they're allowed to under their framework. And we'll try and show you in a minute some of those more direct comparisons.
Thank you.
An order of magnitude that'll allow you to make some judgments in that regard.
So just to step back and summarize real quick, you're calling this activity center, but you're really promoting the community center, which is a subcategory with the 90 dwelling units per acre, max of a 3.0. And so from chart to chart to chart, really following the community center versus the activity center, which is I think is what we're really calling the whole project.
So there are 4 different categories within the activity center. You can be a neighborhood center, community center, major center, or urban center.
All right,
So,
I'll let you continue.
okay. So like urban center is like downtown St. Pete. It looks like St. Pete Beach has a major center, and that actually runs the majority of their Gulf Boulevard. And then take Treasure Island, they have a community center level. So there's different types of levels that are under the activity center.
With respect to the amendment to the countywide plan, it's just a matter of having a framework that will work for you. And the ultimate determination about what's appropriate for you in your activity center rests with the commission. I hope that helps. We have to find a placeholder, if you will, to get consistent with, and within that, then we can determine what it is that you want to do in Johns Pass Village.
Thank you. That helps me so far.
Okay, good. So we plan to not allow this 90 residential units per acre, 150 temporary lodging units, FAR of 3 everywhere. This whole area is broken down into 6 districts that we've identified. The character in this area varies dramatically. So what we have here is we have the traditional village. That's mostly what you think of when you think of Johns Pass Village. It's defined by that massing, rhythm, and scale, which is similar to a traditional main street. It has heavy pedestrian traffic and the close orientation of buildings to the sidewalk and streets. And we also have the commercial core, just like south of that. And that's defined by the orientation of buildings to the street. You have ground and upper level commercial activity, some tourist accommodations. And what we would require also is a buffering between this area to the north and the residential areas. So a step down on 129th. And we have boardwalk, just the boardwalk area, defined by the rustic fishing village style of commercial buildings. You have the second floor along the boardwalk, and then many ground floor businesses focused on the water activities. Johns Pass Resort is across the street, across Gulf Boulevard from the center of the village. This is more larger tourist and multifamily structures that are on the beach. You have the low intensity mixed use district, which is Pelican Lane. It's defined by a mix of residential and temporary lodging directly across the street from that heavy tourism. And then we also have the transitional district, which is north. And that serves more as a buffer and transitions down to the current land uses.
Just for clarity, the commercial core, that would include hotels, because I think we already approved that. Is that correct?
Yes, and there's currently some temporary lodging
Right.
units there.
How would, and Fisherman's Alley, that just cuts right through the middle of it. That's still city property. That wouldn't change, right?
That wouldn't change at all, no.
And I know I'm probably jumping way ahead, but landscaping, waterfront views and trees, that would come later. We're just setting the work for this to
Yes.
even be planned. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
making it
So, yeah, thanks for bringing that up, actually. So we'll actually, in this, with the activity center, we'll really be talking about intensities and densities and all that landscaping, buffering, light design guidelines to keep that character in those districts. That'll come later. That'll come in the zoning. So right now that'll be in they'll come later and we'll talk about
Right.
it.
Seems like that might be a good place to have another town meeting, it seems like, for the folks.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree.
Thank you.
Jenny has described some of the distinctive characteristics of the 6 characteristics based on location within the center to each other, the types of use, design, lot size, layout, density, intensity, all vary internally within Johns Pass Village. And we've tried to recognize some of those distinctions such that one size doesn't fit all. We call it an activity center for the overall designation, but within that, we want to differentiate where it's appropriate to do so. And the next slide starts to get to the point that the commissioner wanted to explore a minute ago. And it lists by the separate character districts what we have initially proposed to be the density standards for residential, temporary lodging, and floor area ratio. It also shows the number of acres in each of the character districts and the percentage of the total in each of those 6 character districts. Just for example, in the commercial core, the suggested maximum residential density, 15 units an acre. Temporary lodging, 75 to 100, the floor area ratio, 2.5 to 3. You'll see the second number in each of those columns with an asterisk on it. What we've suggested is the smaller number of the two, the first number is the standard. That's what would be permitted in an ordinary project. We wanted to try and provide flexibility if there is a need and an opportunity to do more, subject to a bonus that would take it to that next number. And that would be contingent on the approval of a development agreement after 2 public hearings and approval by the commission. So trying to build in some additional flexibility where it might be needed. And that goes to the point of trying to make sure that we've anticipated a coherent relationship between the density and intensity. The density for residential and or temporary lodging versus the floor area ratio for non-residential use. The other aspect of this that's important to bear in mind as you look at these and weigh them is that we propose that it be a dual standard. So both the maximum floor area ratio and the maximum number of units per acre apply, such that if you're going to build a condominium or a hotel with much smaller units, so you think you can build more of them by getting to the maximum floor area ratio, no, you're still limited by the maximum number of units. The other thing that correlation does is to encourage mixed use. If there's an opportunity to have mixed use, whether it be with temporary lodging and retail, residential and office, it allows someone to consider what is the best combination of the two that they can fit within those respective envelopes. So there is some relationship between the two. But I think you can see quickly, without belaboring the point, that all of the proposed residential densities are well below the 90 that the countywide plan theoretically allows. The temporary lodging units, again, the highest number there, 75, is about half what the countywide plan would allow. So we have not gone to those limits. The area where we have proposed at least the opportunity to get to the maximum floor area ratio would occur in the commercial core and the traditional village only, with the potential, subject to a development agreement, to get to a floor area ratio of 3. That's all well and good, you say, but what does that mean? How do you relate that to anything? So what we've tried to do in the next slide is look at what the existing versus proposed average density and intensities are. And this goes back, I think, to the commissioner that asked the original question about what's there now. Let me preface this by saying average maximum density is an abstract thing. What I mean by that is that if all of the acreage, all 27 acres in Johns Pass Village, were all developed exclusively for residential purposes at the maximum allowed in each of the character districts, it would equate to 16.07 residential units per acre. That isn't the way it is now. That's not reality. That could never happen if you had anything but exclusively residential use there. But for order of magnitude and to give you a basis of comparison, under the existing countywide plan, that number allowed now is 24. The Johns Pass Village Activity Center that we propose, using the standards you just saw for each of the character districts, would equate to 19. So a slight increase, potential, hypothetical, in residential density. That 19, in turn, compares to the 90 that was identified previously. It's about 21% of the maximum allowed under the countywide plan. That same comparison then, temporary lodging units under the current city plan, average maximum would be 51 units. We propose it would yield 56. That's about 37% of the countywide maximum. The existing floor area ratio, average maximum, today, we compute to be 1.24. And under the Johns Pass Village, the average maximum would be 1.9, again, compared to the 3. So while the numbers themselves don't mean a lot in terms of what you're going to actually see, it is a way to make some comparison with what the existing plans show versus what the proposed activity center plan would allow. Again, all of this subject, obviously, to your input and
So
your
what, so
suggestions.
if I might, so what you're proposing is that the standard, the Johns Pass Village Activity Center standard would be the allowance for anyone to come in and say, we want to build this, and these are my drawings, and this is what I'm going for, and I would like a permit. The bonus would require, you could get there without, but you would need a PD and you would need approval from the board.
You would
To
need a
get there.
development agreement.
Commissioner.
So they wouldn't
Right.
have to go to PD unless if there was other standards in the code that would come later in the zoning.
And the countywide standard, you just couldn't reach it, or
That's correct.
we would not, it would not be
Would
in
not be
the,
able to reach that.
Not without going through this same process all over again with an amendment to your plan here at the local level and an amendment to the countywide plan. We've had discussions with the countywide staff to this point. And you'll see some of the numbers that they project are based on their standard. Well, that isn't what we propose. And so if you project those numbers relative to whatever impact you're trying to measure, you get a distorted number. We are prepared, again, and I emphasize this, subject to the commission's agreement, to stipulate in the plan that any amendment that would increase any of these densities in this plan that would attempt to achieve more would have to come back to the city commission and be approved as a formal plan amendment and go through that same iteration. So we're trying to make it definitive that this is what is available, but this is what we mean. It isn't just a wish list.
so again, the bonus would be twice the FAR that's existing.
That's correct, Commissioner. That could be, yes. Mhm.
So do we have a development agreement for anything other than PDs?
I don't know the answer.
Not that I know of. Usually, well, with a PD, you have to have a development agreement.
Right.
But
I don't think the reverse is true. I haven't
yeah,
looked at that aspect of your code. Maybe Tom can answer, but I think you can process and consider a development agreement outside of a rezoning.
yes, I asked Tom that before. He said that is fine. The county also suggested that to us when we met with them. That we could require development agreements with higher bonuses, higher densities, higher FARs. So they suggested that to us.
So it could exceed the bonus.
No, it still couldn't
Couldn't.
exceed the bonus, but to get to that bonus, you would have to have a
Have the
development.
PD, okay.
agreement.
The existing, what you have here, the numbers, the 1.24 FAR existing Madeira Beach Comprehensive Plan. When you say existing, that's not by what's allowable, but is a reflection of what's existing currently there,
No, sir, it's based on what's allowable.
what's allowable.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mhm.
Because that was where we started our conversation, existing versus
Right.
what's allowable, because there's a lot of property out there that's developed beyond what's allowable.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to, in my own mind, and be able to, whatever decisions we make, be able to support a decision based on, well, it's already there. We just basically are approving to build back, and we need to do this and approve this to build back where we are now in case an Ian ever showed up in our front door, or existing means what the ordinance says.
That's
So
certainly
that-
part of the rationale, but it's not the entire.
I understand, but I think we need those two visuals
Sure.
compared to what's proposed.
Okay, well, let me give you just quickly, and these are at the high end. They're not, I'm not representing that this is the average or throughout. But For example, in the boardwalk district, which is now limited to the 0.55 in the countywide plan and 1.2 in yours, the existing, some of the existing examples range up to 1.25. About twice what the countywide plan allows, a little more than what the city plan allows. Under the Johns Pass Resort, it's 1.55. Traditional Village, 1.74. So not too different than what the Johns Pass Village potential maximum average would be. Just to give you a flavor that, you know, we have looked at those numbers.
No, it's a lot to wrap your mind around.
It is.
Yes.
And my hope tonight is not to get mired, to give you a feel for what we've done and how we've done it and a sense of what's here, without burdening you with too much of the weeds.
No, but decisions will have to be made down the road, and you have to have a rationale on how and why you're making those decisions. So
Absolutely.
you have to have that feel for what's there versus what you're proposing,
No disagreement.
and why it's being proposed. I mean, I try to come to these meetings with, how does this benefit the residents? That's
I think-
always on my
I don't want to belabor it, but I think first it tries to protect in what's there now to the extent that it is non-conforming and could not be replaced were there a storm event. But secondly, it tries to anticipate that over time, just as Jenny's historical list showed, Johns Pass Village has evolved and it's going to continue to do that.
Sure.
There's going to be needs and opportunities to revitalize. And we want to build in some margin beyond just what's there today to allow that to happen in terms of an economic reinvestment.
Mr. Healy, if I could ask, how will this community center designation impact the impervious surface ratio? I don't see any designation at all in the plan. Is it, or does it impact it at all? We've already voted on it. I think it's 0.85 in that area.
That's really gets to a decision in the zoning, much like some of the other things Jenny mentioned, the setbacks, building height and so forth. But if that's the policy and that's what you'd like to maintain, that can certainly be done. It doesn't speak to it here because it doesn't relate to the primary density intensity standards of your plan or the countywide plan. But yes, that's on the table, and
The countywide plan doesn't supersede or change what we've got, what we put in place.
No,
it does not.
no.
No.
Okay.
And we'll be discussing that when we look at the zoning.
And if I could ask just one more question that's not exactly related. Mr. Healy, are you affiliated with Forward Pinellas? Is that why you're involved with this project? Because it looks like it says you changed, were we doing this with Forward Pinellas? And are you a representative from them?
No, I'm not.
Oh,
No, I'm a private planning consultant with Healy Consultant Services. I have my own office. I was previously employed for 21 years as the executive director of the Pinellas Planning Council, which was the predecessor to Forward Pinellas.
okay.
But I have no relationship with them whatsoever.
Is there an
Since
official?
2010.
Okay, I'm just trying to, I wasn't here for that part of it. Do we have a Forward Pinellas representative or are we just,
Yes,
oh, we do, okay.
yes. It is, there are several of the beach communities. I think it's the Big C group is represented by a single person. I'm not sure any longer who it is. I believe most recently it was Mayor Cookie Kennedy from Indian Rocks Beach. I don't know if that's still
I think Cookie's term was up. I think Al Johnson is now the member.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay, so how do we reach these FAR values? Once you get stuck in the zoning and where you only have 34 feet and you do have only 85% of the land value that you can produce or that you can use. How do we get to a 2.4 FAR value?
Well, you may not. Again, those are kind of the maximum outer framework that are in place. And there will be based on lot size and all of the other things you just mentioned, lot coverage, permeable surface ratio, you may not be able to achieve those maximums. Again, there's no guarantee that on a given lot or property that you could get that number of residential units or that number of temporary lodging units on a per acre basis. Does that help or did I miss the point?
No, you got the point, but I'm thinking if you're trying to sell something,
That it's higher, maybe higher than it needs to be?
then it's ever, yeah.
It would be a function of building height. I mean, that's the basic differential. As Jenny's visualization slide showed, you can achieve a floor area ratio of 1 with entirely the lot covered with a single-story building, or with half of it covered with a 2-story building. So those are the variables in the equation. Okay. Tell me your level of patience for this. We'll forge ahead if we're ready. Look quickly then at traffic. Obviously, one of the concerns anytime you change the plan, you have to evaluate is traffic. We've evaluated the traffic generation. There's 2 components to it, vehicular traffic and then public transit, pedestrian and bicycle movement. The good news is that no matter which way you run the numbers, the existing city plan, whether you're looking at the existing countywide plan or the proposed activity center plan, the numbers are virtually the same, about 8,600, 8,700 vehicle trips per day. The additional factor to be considered is that the formula under the countywide plan runs that 325 vehicle trips per acre times 50%. So it actually, on paper, shows a reduction in traffic. I'm not here to tell you that putting the activity center designation on the map will reduce traffic. It may in the long run, because it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. If it's a successful activity center, it encourages more public transit or pedestrian and bicycle traffic. The vehicular traffic could in fact be reduced because of the internal capture rate that occurs with a mixed use project. But with respect strictly to the vehicular traffic, there is virtually no increase and potentially, at least under the formula, a reduction in vehicular traffic. Traffic and pedestrian, transit and pedestrian access, of course, you know as well as I do, served by the Suncoast Beach Trolley and PSTA Route 68. We've calculated the number of trips there. There are 5 existing bus stops in the Johns Pass Village vicinity. The PSTA Transit Development Plan proposes to increase headways on both of those public transit services from 30 to 15 minutes. Again, some of that obviously depends on the demand and the service that people desire to make use of. We mentioned already Gulf Boulevard's proposed as a secondary future transit corridor in the roadway plan. And that the very purpose of that is intended to focus on activity centers along the corridor, much as it does with St. Pete Beach, Treasure Island, Madeira Beach, and on up the beach. There are challenges you know about well with respect to increased pedestrian access with the narrow rights of way and sidewalk widths that we'll look to. And one of the things we've talked about is if and when the plan is approved and in place and the zoning's in place, we'll look to a more detailed urban design type plan that looks at things like sidewalks, wayfinding or signage, improvements to the public realm like landscaping and benches and so forth, but a detail hopefully to be addressed in the future. Yep, to the next slide, dealing with coastal high hazard area. Again, I don't need to remind you that not only is Johns Pass Village, but all of the city is in the coastal high hazard area. It's an important consideration and it's required to be addressed both by consistent with state requirements and the countywide criteria. And we have done that. We find it is compliance with those provisions. We've spent some considerable time in the draft report going through those individual criteria, and there's some 9 separate criteria that they ask that we evaluate. And they range, I'll just give you a flavor for what they sound like. There, we've cited existing policies in your plan and the countywide plan to support development, particularly with respect to tourism. And the kinds of things the county will ask us to address in our plan are utilization of existing and planned infrastructure, the maintenance and improvement of scenic qualities, whether there are water dependent uses. That's a key aspect of Johns Pass Village that allows it to qualify here with your marine related uses along the pass. Is it part of a community development plan? And is there a clustering of uses that occurs as a result of the activity center? So all of those things are being addressed in the plan, and we think comport and will meet the criteria with respect to its location in the coastal high hazard area. Next to last, with respect to some of the other important parts of the plan, your comprehensive plan clearly does support the special character and unique design features of Johns Pass Village. This builds on that and reinforces it. Jenny has done a nice job in the text, the narrative with the pictures and explanation of those particular design features that make it special and unique. There are also portions of the countywide strategies that require certain design principles, and they're listed here. I won't go through them all, but from connectivity to site orientation and public realm enhancements, we have detailed each of those and how we think Johns Pass Village both addresses them and some of the challenges and issues you face in improving upon them. So it tries to cover both sides of that equation. Lastly, I'm going to cover the plan adoption implementation steps. Jenny did a quick overview of that, but so that you can ask more questions about it specifically. There are 5 separate steps outlined here. The first would be for the city commission to determine that it wants to amend its comprehensive plan. And I'm sorry, let me back up. You have already amended your comprehensive plan to enable an activity center category. It's just a placeholder. It's pending second ordinance reading, as I understand it, for ordinance 2022-03. And all it did was in your comprehensive plan, identify activity center as an available category, should you choose to use it. When that's in place and subject to the public hearings by the Planning and Zoning Commission and this board, the initial action on the part of the city would be to adopt the plan and a corresponding amendment to your future land use map. With that, after that first reading, it would go to Forward Pinellas for their consideration at public hearing and their recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners as the countywide planning authority for their approval of the amendment to the countywide plan. Technically, they're reviewing your plan to qualify as an amendment, but what they're actually doing is amending their own plan to allow you to do what you've asked to do in the plan. Once that's taken place, it would come back to the city for your second reading and final action. And with that, we have committed in the plan to a follow-up within, I think, 1 year maximum to prepare and adopt the zoning regulations that we talked about a little bit tonight that would further implement and detail the specifics of the plan. So those are the major steps, and be glad to try and answer any questions you have on that or anything else we've tried to cover here quickly tonight.
Dave, what would the timeline on this look like?
If it's the commission's pleasure that we proceed, Mayor, to public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Board, that requires notice and all of the formalities, of course. Probably the earliest that could be done would be in sometime in November. And if that were then recommended by the Planning and Zoning Board, could come back conceivably to the commission in December or January, depending on the exact timing of your meeting and notice, so forth. So potentially, first action by the city could be complete by the end of the year or January. Then the Forward Pinellas hearing, probably January to February, and the Board of County Commissioners, I would guess March or April would be the maximum or the ideal amount of time that it could be accomplished in. Can take as long as you want. There's not a deadline for you to act. So we want you to be comfortable with it first. and move forward from there. But probably realistically, 6 months probably from start to finish.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, thank you. By the way, guys, you did an amazing job on this. That's why I didn't ask any questions, because I just kind of read through this and just kind of amazed. And everybody asked some really good questions, but I think we might be looking a little too deep from our vantage point here, because you just said something a minute ago and I wrote it down just because it really caught me. All we're doing really, guys, is we're creating an available category should we, and I added this part, or a future board choose to use it. The odds that this sitting board here is ever going to approve any particular project on that is probably minuscule. But what we're doing is we're setting the bar, we're setting a parameter on giving the people the ability to, if they wanted to go to here, fine. If we want to stick with the regular, fine. So let's kind of just look at it. I mean, just from my vantage point, let's look at it like that. These guys have done, and Dave's track record speaks for itself. I mean, we shouldn't even, he's forgotten more about planning and zoning and that kind of thing in this county than any of us are ever going to know. So just kind of keep it in that kind of, we're not really approving anything today to build anything there, but it's cleaning up what we currently have that honestly, if it blew away tomorrow, we'd be, in probably the same shape they're down in Fort Myers right now. So yeah, just look at it as a strategic move more than anything else, that it prepares us, God forbid something happens going forward. And it also gives us or future boards the ability to generate more tax dollars out of there if the right opportunity occurs. So I love it, guys. Thank you.
Anyone else?
No, when you come back, hopefully, the initial discussion, I'd like to have more on that. That's all.
We'll do that, Commissioner.
What do you think the page
I don't know if
slide?
there's any
for-
specific direction you want to give us or the staff in terms of proceeding to public hearing with the planning commission or not? If there's something you want to come back and visit again, another workshop, we're happy to
Well,
do that.
I like what I see. And I will say we touched a little bit on ISR. We had a presentation at the Big C a couple of months ago. Commissioner Kerr attended, and it was a resiliency presentation. And the question was asked about ISR on the barrier islands. The question was asked, is it true or isn't it true that with such a high water table, the rainwater that comes down, whether it goes to a pervious surface or whether it runs down the gutter, one way or another, it's going to the bay. Is that or is that not correct? And Mr. Kerr, do you remember what that answer was?
No, it was a great discussion, and actually you brought that up, and what I recall that I had never heard is, that with sea level rise, as sea level rises, so does the groundwater. So that kind of, the whole impervious surface ratio is less important. I don't recall the question and answer verbatim, but yeah, it's not as important. But that being said, I don't want to redo all that.
Yeah,
0.85, I think, is what we approved, and
Yeah, well, the point was on the pervious surfaces, whether it's going through the ground, going to a retention area and is pumped into the bay, or if it just runs down the gutter and it goes to the bay. Ultimately, it's going to the same place, and you're just spending a whole lot of money with making pervious surfaces all over a community where the water table is so high. But I just wanted to bring that up for discussion, even though we're past that. But I mean, we can workshop it again if y'all would like to, but we've got it here right now unless y'all want to look over this data some more and address it at another time.
The only thing, you had emergency had to walk out, and I don't think you were here for the discussion. My question was the current ordinances and zoning versus what's actually there. Do we have a visual graphic of that versus number 3, where what's proposed? That's all. And that's what I was referring to. I'd like
A
to come back.
visualization, Commissioner, that I think we've done. We can attempt to do that. We have the numbers, a table or a chart, but.
Right. And then Commissioner Hudson came up with a great question about the 37 feet and how do you reach that with a 2.43 FAR, but I imagine you can. It depends on what the dimensions are between levels. I don't know. Just doing quick math in my head. You can have the 3 or 4.
Well, and again, the height is a variable that we can specify in the zoning with specific reference to the activity center. And there will be other standards like setback and density and so forth that will apply uniquely under this framework. And you could do the same with building height in terms of the different character districts, should you choose to do that.
And that would come later in the zoning portion, not the land use portion, which is what we're talking about right now, but that would come after the setbacks, the height, landscaping, all of those requirements. That's in the code of ordinances. That's more restrictive. That's more of the nitty gritty. So that would come after.
Sure, it all goes hand in hand with
Yes.
approving a FAR. You have to understand what that means is how that impacts height or how that, so they do go hand in hand. So I appreciate the question.
So are you looking at adding a column in slide 14, showing an example, I guess, either a location that is higher than this number or at this number to let people get an understanding of what's there now?
I was more referring to like on diagram 12, this is, a reflection of what our current codes are. You have certain densities for each of these sections.
Mhm.
Now, some of these sections exceed what the ordinance is, what our codes allow. So what's that look like? And then a third, what does that same visual look like, what's being proposed? As far as the density, basically, because that's the passion out, what I hear, the passion is everyone's concerned about increasing it. The net increase of visitors, yes, it increases taxes, but it's also increases visitors, which increases a stress on services provided, which increases costs, which we've already determined the majority of the costs are borne by the residents, not by the commercial properties. Yeah, you're going to get impact fees. That's where the whole impact fees started because of that concept. So it just needs to be justified. I'm pro-business, but I'm also pro-business. A business has to recover its costs to the community. So it's all a balancing act in my mind. More visitors is not necessarily a net gain. For many residents, it's definitely a negative. So you hear that rebuttal all the time. I'm all about progress, but it has to be reasonable. And I just have to understand it so that when I'm discussing with someone, I feel confident in what I'm supporting or not supporting. So, and that's a big piece of it. I support the what's there, you know, when someone bought a piece of property and runs a business and if they were to lose that business and couldn't rebuild their exact business, there's something wrong with that. So what's that look like on paper versus what our codes say it can be? And then what's it look like? Okay, we want to propose more density. What's that look like? Is that a good thing? It's a good thing for sales tax. It's a good thing for the state. It's a good thing for the county. Is it a good thing for the residents of Madeira Beach? That's my question. So.
It'll help fill up that new parking garage.
That's true.
Yep. And that in turn helps the residents and gets the streets
that-
paved and we get underground
that's
utilities.
the
and- Yeah, it's
discussion.
all, yeah,
That's
no,
the
it's all,
discussion.
it's all of them. There's a lot of moving parts. My vote would be to, let's throw this to the planning commission, let them take a whack at it and then let's see what they have to say and they can bring us back to us with any changes and we can change from there. If we throw it through, I mean, I don't really think another workshop's going to change anything on anybody's mind on whether we should move forward with this. So at this point, I mean, where it sits right now, we're not approving anything tonight. But I said, let's give the planning commission a whack at it and then we'll take a look at it again when it comes back to us.
Yeah, I agree that they've done a heck of a job with it. I think this is probably a lot of this has been to the planning commission, correct?
Pretty
So
much the same.
Are we beating a dead horse here by taking it back to the planning commission or?
Well, I think you need to anyway for public hearing purposes under your code for
But-
recommendation.
But I mean, we've already, we talk about what we're doing here. We've already cut back from 100% to 85% on the ISR. So that was a substantial cutback on what they will have the ability to do should we have some catastrophic event down there. So, I understand what you're saying, Commissioner Kerr, but don't forget to put that ISR in the equation also, because the businesses that are already there are already being limited in what they can rebuild down there.
And I think having that information helps, or it feels a little bit like a snake oil sales right now. And I'm not trying to do that. We're trying to make sense to everybody.
Right. But that's why I brought up what I did about the ISR and the presentation that was given to us at the Big C. And that's why I was glad that Commissioner Kerr was there so that he could see what I have said on numerous occasions during a commission meeting, that it doesn't matter on a barrier island where you've got a very high water table.
Right.
Because all we're doing is it's going down basically to a sump, a pump's catching it and it's pumping it over the seawall right into the bay anyhow. So I just don't want to put even more burdens. And I liked the presentation and I don't want to put even more burdens than we already have with that big change from 100% to 85.
This already went to the planning commission and you can, if you watch it, there weren't a lot of comments and the whole board there wasn't a very good discussion. There was a much better discussion here tonight, I think, than when they looked at it in the preliminary. So I hope they do. More people talk.
That's not my recollection that it went from 100% down to 85.
It
I
actually.
thought it went up from 75 to 80.
0.70 to up to 0.85. In actuality, many of the businesses are at 100%, but it was we were going up from 0.70 to 0.85.
Yeah, it increased by code.
Well, but it's 100% right now.
Some of the businesses are.
So I just wanted that point made that the ISR is not on a barrier island as important. And let me say this, I love landscaping. I mean, you look at my yard, I've got, landscaping all over the place. But all I'm saying is that it's not the great panacea that everyone would like to think it is on a barrier island as far as runoff goes. All I'm saying is that the runoff's going to the bay one way or another. That's all. And that's probably not even a subject for right now.
No, but it's
Or-
being filtered, but that's okay.
So I guess we need to carry this back to a workshop regardless, did you say, Mr. Healy?
No, I didn't, Mayor. If I did, I didn't mean to say that.
Okay.
I think before it comes back to you for action, it has to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for public hearing. and
Okay,
Their
all right,
recommendation
that's
to
okay.
you. Yeah.
All right. So I would say that's where we are, is that it needs to go back to
Mhm.
zoning and planning for that.
Just as was stated.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
Thank you for your time.
Is there any public comment on this? Having no more business tonight, this meeting is adjourned at 8:35 PM.